Welcome to Longevity Industries. This is the presentation of the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. I'm Dean Phillips, and I am your host. I'd like to especially thank our sponsors, the Precision Metal Forming Association and the PMA's Educational Foundation, for helping us put this show together. Our guest today, Iossi from Better by Design, LLC. He is a technical sales engineer over there. Welcome, Bob.
How you doing, Dean?
Great to have you here. And right off the bat, what are some of the things that you see changing over the next 5 years in manufacturing?
Well, Dean, I think, we'll see more significant automation in manufacturing, but certainly not nearly enough. Mm-hmm. Companies just don't spend enough money for automation and equipment upgrades that they need to. We'll continue to see job shortages over the next 10 years, especially as more and more of us people like my age retire, and especially in the skills for tool and die, electrical, mechanical, and even some operations. Manufacturing and operations, they constantly struggle to find the workers that they need and the talent, and we've got to do a better job of, getting more people spun up on manufacturing. We need, less people in the arts and more people in the manufacturing engineering areas.
Oh yeah.
We've got to, manufacturers have to spend more money to train engineering and maintenance talent. There's just not enough out there, and there's a lot of ways to do that I won't go into right now, but I think you're going to see, as we have more and more IT and cyber security issues, manufacturing and operation networks will continue to separate. I know that's a very controversial statement. Strong IT departments try to, hold those two networks together, but it isn't working out real well. So I think there'll continue to be more and more separation there, especially as the IT folks fight the cyber security issues. And until that settles down, we're going to have that need to pull those away from each other. You can't afford to have manufacturing be down,
right? And
and still get product out.
Yeah.
I think we'll continue to see artificial intelligence and vision, robotics, ERP, MRP, CMMS, and PLC systems will continue to grow in size and control, but it won't dominate manufacturing inside the buildings yet. I think it'll be outside the buildings and it'll become bigger and better outside. But I think manufacturing is still a ways off from, making those dominant systems. Communications will continue to be a bigger and bigger issue as we connect more and more machines to those networks. And then additive manufacturing, 3D printers, tooling, sensors that communicate, all that will continue to grow, but I don't see that dominating the manufacturing space in the next 10 years.
Right. Well,
those are some of my thoughts.
Let me ask you about your background. Now, you've spent 40 years in manufacturing. So tell us how you got to be here and what inspired you to get into manufacturing.
I just had a student ask me that the other day. Kind of funny coincidence, but I do a lot of speaking to college and high school students, and it actually came down to a job offer. Caterpillar, asked me to come work for them after I got out of the Navy, and that was such a huge draw for me. I figured I would learn so much working for Caterpillar that I just jumped at the opportunity, and that was probably the best 2 or 3 years I ever spent in my life, because I was learning everything about manufacturing then.
Is there anything you can think back on that just was an aha moment for you when you were at Caterpillar, or when you were first getting into this, that said, or a book you read or something that said, wow, this is changing, this will change the way I look at things?
Well, when I went into Caterpillar, I really didn't know anything about manufacturing. In the Navy, I was telecommunications and satellite communications, high frequency transmitters. It was a night and day difference. And so I cut my teeth, at Caterpillar, and what a wonderful company to work for when you're learning. Right. So I just learned everything. I didn't really understand manufacturing at all. People say, well, how did you get into manufacturing? Well, I fell into it. I just got a job offer. Nobody ever came around to talk to us in school about, what do you want to be when you grow up, kind of thing.
Right.
And so I try to do that a lot today, because, not when people say, hey, I want to be a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, they don't even know what that means. And then also they can't really express within that job classification what is it that they want to do. Like when I was going through high school, I thought I wanted to get into bioengineering. And back then that was like hardly ever heard of.
Right.
And I never did pursue that. And but today that's a pretty big thing. So, but yeah, I learned everything that I knew about manufacturing, more of the details of that at Caterpillar. And then, Caterpillar sent me to an Allen Bradley CNC class. And after I went to that, I wanted to work for that company. And so before I even left the school, it was a 2-week school. I asked them if they were hiring and ended up getting a job offer from them. And then I spent the next 25 years at Allen Bradley, ultimately Rockwell Automation and Reliance Electric. So that was, and then of course at Allen Bradley, you learn about every industry there. So it was, that gave me a very diverse scope of manufacturing. One day you're in the steel mill, and the next day you're on the automotive line, and the next day, you're at the chemical plant, and the next day you're, assembling Oshkosh trucks or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that's an amazing, company to work for. I got so lucky in my career, and so I basically started off there as a field engineer, became an application engineer, systems engineer, then project manager, ultimately became the operations manager. And, but this was really before System Integrators existed. So we were our own internal Systems Integrator group. So we came up with solutions to customers' problems. So we basically built the business from virtually zero to $50 million in Chicago. And I think it was $400 million globally. So, that was my first 25 years in that business.
Great. Thinking in those terms of what you've done as far as that kind of integration side of things, if you look at our industries, manufacturing as a whole, what are your thoughts and your feelings for how quickly we are adopting automation and robotics? Well,
I'm normally very optimistic, but I have kind of a pessimistic view of that. I think American manufacturers, one of the reasons why so many production lines ended up overseas is we were too slow at implementing automation. And, we were happy to just keep making the product the same way that we had made it for the last 20 years. And that wasn't the only reason, but, that was one of the big things. And I still see that today. I really don't think American business executives understand the cost of automation. People, I can't tell you how many projects, we've done where somebody says, well, we want you to do this, and you're looking at it saying, oh, that's probably a $500,000 job. And they're going, well, they only allocated us $100,000 to do this.
Yeah. That along the lines of that, I think one of the situations is that I think in other countries, there's an acceptance of how long something that's R&D takes to get off the ground. Whereas here it's like, okay, you need to have a 1-year payback in many instances.
Right. Right. I gotta tell my stockholders that, I got a return on this money.
Right.
And there's times when I honestly just look at customers and I kind of just go, wow. It's just, I just sometimes don't think they think through what they're asking for. And, it's unfortunate because we are the best country in the world to do these kinds of things. And the other thing is, I don't think our, American, management really values the mechanical and electrical engineers like they used to.
Right.
They don't look at them like they're one of their up and rising financial stars or their IT stars. They don't give them the same level of authority, and they just kind of run them in the ground until they retire. And I just think we as a country have to do a better job of those talented people and keep them challenged. Most engineering people, they're not out looking for the most money they can make or the most this or that. They just like a little bit of recognition, and they like to be challenged. Mm-hmm. And they like to learn about the next thing coming down the pike. And I don't think we as a country do as good a job as we could there, to service that.
I agree. I think that, unfortunately, when we switch to these mechatronics programs, you could see a shift to where people were going to use engineers not to be engineers, but to be program managers. I got a project. I need you to go out and be a project manager. Go make sure that this comes in on time. Make sure that this is laid out correctly.
Yeah.
Do you also see that we're using robots to the best of our ability, like automation and robotics?
Well, I like to separate the term automation and robotics because there's so many times that I see where, we didn't really need a robot on something that could have been done with a very inexpensive articulated arm, mechanism. But somebody stuck a robot on it and it never changes.
Right.
I kind of look at it as that's just an expensive piece of hardware that you didn't need. And so no, I don't think we do a great job of that still today. There's still people still look at robots as job killers, which is such a horrible term because they're really job enhancers. They really make jobs, easier for everyone. And if they're done right. But I think, we just have to remove that, I'll call it hostility between employees and unions and robots. And I remember the first robot we put in at Maytag down in Heron, Illinois. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to put that directly across from the employee break room because they wanted the employees to see that the robots were still working, unloading old mechanical presses, press tending, mm-hmm. and while they were braking. And I kind of shook my head and said, why do you want to do that? And they're like, well, we want them to see that, they can be replaced by robots. And I'm like, you're creating hostility that you don't really need.
Right.
I can't tell you what to do, but I would highly recommend you not do that. And they did it anyhow. So, and, I just don't know, why that has to be a hostile environment. I think we should embrace automation and robotics a lot more than what we do. I mean, I see so many jobs that are going on where, their employees are just out there doing routine operations. They're, taking a tube or a, piece of metal off of a machine and putting it in a box, and stuff mm-hmm. like that. It's such a poor use of workers, and we could challenge them so much more to handle complex operations that we can't or don't even want to program in a robot.
Yeah.
And stop handling material and boxes. So I think, to your point, we can do that so much better. And there just isn't enough of that today. We're still doing way too many things with operators and, people that should be automated.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that, because when I look at how parts are loaded and unloaded, everybody will say the same things, which is the more times you handle a part, the more chance you have of having a scratch, dent, part that's mishandled or there's a problem because of it. So you want to minimize that. So why do we want to continue down that road without figuring out better solutions? I think to your point, you hit it on the head, I thought, is because we've always done it. Once you put something in place, like a robot or something, then that's what you always replace it with, is another robot. You don't look to an alternative solution. You don't try to find a different way of doing things. Do you think that we have, when we look at the labor shortage that we have right now, do you think that automation and robotics solves that, or is that more of a cultural situation?
Well, I think, a lot of the jobs that we're looking for labor in manufacturing, it's the same job it was 20 years ago. And, younger people today don't really want to do that anymore. This would be like, I was telling the story about, my uncle cutting down a tree with a 2-man saw. We don't want to keep cutting down trees with 2-man saws. We want to use a chainsaw. And if you keep bringing young people in generation after generation and you keep giving them a 2-man saw to cut down the trees, we're not really improving things. And, that's one of the reasons why young people think, manufacturing is this deep, dirty, dark, job. And we just haven't found a way to make it fun, exciting, and challenging. And I think that has to be management's role. We have to get something that will draw these younger folks into manufacturing and keep them challenged. And giving them a different cardboard box to fill, or giving them a different, pair of gloves to use is not what we're talking about here. We need to give them challenging jobs that will, satisfy them. So I think management has to decide, what they're going to do and how they're going to implement it. Because if we don't change the way we keep doing these things, we're not going to have the people that we need in the manufacturing space.
And I was just talking to a manufacturer the other day, and they told me that they're basically hiring about 50 people because they know they're only going to be able to keep about 5.
Well, I've had people tell me that they brought people in, they trained them for a day, and they never showed up the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why did that happen? Well, they didn't like what they had to do. Well, okay. Did you talk to them about what they were going to be doing? And, being in my, if I put on my SME hat, I hear from executives all the time that tell me, we can't find the workers. And I'll say, instead of just saying, oh yeah, you're right, or something, I'll say, well, what did you do differently to try to find the workers? And they're like, what do you mean? I go, what'd you do differently? It wasn't working before. How are you going about finding them? We searched the internet for, people that were looking for work. I go, are those the people you want to hire? Or do you want to hire the people who already have a job that are wanting to be challenged? A higher skilled worker or whatever. Oh, I never thought about that. So what is your HR people doing? Well, they're combing through thousands of resumes. Okay. What have you tried reaching out to local high schools or, local colleges where they have shop programs or they have something else going on there? Oh, no, I never did do that. That's a good idea. Just some basic stuff like that. You would think that they would be trying to do things differently. And it just seems like companies are still just going through the motions of, oh, I got a resume, let's interview, that kind of thing, instead of trying to reach out and identify people on LinkedIn or whatever that, are real outgoing and, they want to be challenged and they're looking for jobs. And, some companies, are some companies doing that? Yes, they are. But
they're the minority.
I don't think most of them. they're the minority. Yeah, they are. They really are.
And I think what it is, part of it is, anyways, is they're locked into a dollar figure. And they're like, well,
yes,
I can't keep this person at that dollar figure. So how am I going to get somebody who's better than them at that same rate?
I get those calls all the time. Hey, we're looking for a highly skilled, talented engineer that knows this, and this, and they need to have robotics experience. Okay. How many years experience? 20 years. Okay. What's the salary range? 60, 70,000. I'm like, stop looking.
Yeah.
You're not even in the ballpark.
Right.
That's what you're going to pay somebody, with a couple of years experience coming out of college.
I had interviewed.
And they're like, we're not going to be able to hire somebody at 100,000. Right. I go, well, then you're not going to find anybody good.
Right. And it was interesting when I interviewed some of the students from Tennessee Tech and University at Memphis and MTSU, and a few of the students over at UT. And one of the things is that I asked that question. I said, what is the dollar figure you're expecting? Now, the non-traditional students, meaning that they've already been out, they've been working and have returned to, they have a different perspective. They're willing to say, hey, look, I'm willing to take X dollars, usually probably in the $50,000 to $70,000 range to start and prove myself. But if you think that you're going to get somebody with years of experience for under that $80,000 number, you're probably going to struggle to find that person. And one of the biggest problems that I see out there right now is, how much do you think they're paying in California? 110, 120?
Oh, at least.
Right.
Probably 130.
Right. Now, let's say that they can work remotely. Well, then I'm now no longer limited to what I would have paid somebody in California at 120. I could now pay somebody in Tennessee. I could pay them $90,000, and it's a bump up in pay for them, but it's a $20,000 savings for our plant. But that's raising, that kind of, the water raises all boats kind of mentality is
right.
All wages are going up across the board because people can work remotely. Consequently, they're no longer limiting themselves to a region. They're recruiting from companies across not only the U.S., but
the world.
Yeah.
Right.
And why should I limit myself to do that when I can get a very good employee for less money? But the problem is now in those job markets, it is harder to maintain them because you were only paying them 70 before, and now you want that same skill set at 70, but you're going to have to pay them 80 or 90.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've had this conversation with a lot of manufacturers about, regions, where people live and stuff. And, it's kind of all over the map. And the thing that just drives me nuts is they'll basically offer somebody in finance, for example, a six-figure salary, but they won't offer an engineer a six-figure salary. And to me, that's just not right.
Right. They both went to school for 4 years.
Well, it's not even that. It's just, how do you value what you're doing? You don't need accountants and financial people if you can't make product.
There's plenty of plants.
I'm not saying that one should be dominant over the other, but they ought to be somewhat equal.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just kind of irks me when I see that happening. But it's all over the place. It's not just one company. It's sometimes an entire industry.
I've seen the same thing where a lot of companies we're going to hire a manager. Okay. You're going to have them manage people. I get that, but you're managing a press room, or you're managing, you're having a machine shop and you're managing that. Yes, it's one thing to manage people, but it is another when you don't have any experience in that technology, because then they just start finger pointing. If they know you don't know, where does it, if you go into a stamping operation, I could tell you where the finger gets pointed, the material, because that's the easy blame, because that person isn't there. You know, it isn't the tooling guy. It isn't the press guy. It isn't the maintenance. It's going to be the material, because they're not there to defend themselves or say, hey, that material, here's the spec sheet on it. That's not the problem. You're not setting this job up right.
Right.
But when you're a manager, you're over that department, and that includes those things. You're responsible for getting parts out of that department. Your job isn't just to manage people. And too many companies now are just hiring business administration people to just manage people, because that's what you think you're doing, is just managing people.
Right. Yeah, there's a definite, I'll call it oversimplification of those roles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to some degree, Dean, it's just coming down to where, there's people under pressure to hire people.
Right.
And they're hiring people that maybe really don't have the right skill level. And then if all of a sudden you're working for one of those people that doesn't have a good skill background, then you start to lose patience with them in getting your job done, and it kind of lowers your mentality.
Yes.
There's so many people changing jobs, and maybe it's because of COVID. I don't follow those trends as well as I should, but I mean, I just see so many people changing jobs now these days. It's just, they're just job hopping everywhere.
What do you think the role of government is in helping solve this problem for manufacturing?
Well, government hasn't done a real good job of solving too many problems in anything. Sometimes they make it worse. Mm-hmm. I know some of their attempts at helping manufacturing didn't do any good. I've seen them invest, like perfect examples when we did the Ford Taurus conversion from the Jellybean Taurus to the 500 car, and then ultimately to the new style Taurus. We had all kinds of government interaction there. Government created a problem for Ford that they didn't have, and that is they wanted only to hire people from Cook County, and Ford couldn't find people that had enough skill level and basic skills, so they actually had to pay to have people trained on reading, writing, and mathematics.
Yeah,
and in order to even hire them, but they were under this guideline that they could only hire people from Cook County, and then the government would help fund their training. And so they struggled with that, and we struggled with helping them with that. And sometimes government puts all these parameters around it, and it makes it almost impossible to be successful. I can think of when Archie Duncan was the education secretary. He was funneling money into a group in Chicago, and they were using it for their own salaries instead of putting it back into education to make stuff happen.
Right.
And I'm sure there's people that could give you thousands of examples like that, but government could really help manufacturing if they really wanted to, and if they really did it the right way. But I haven't seen too much of the right way in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you're right, and especially with foreign trade right now, and with things coming in, the competition on materials, they're going to have to do something, because when when China isn't held to any real standard, the price of their material is not coming in at a competitive and true rate of what it costs to make it.
Right.
And it's hard to get them to stand behind the dumping as which we've seen in products that way. But until we, enough people say, look, enough is enough. Because right now the problem is I think in general, we're still willing to keep our heads in the sand and say, well, it's a free market. So whatever it is what it is. And
well, I think, government, I mean, how many years, did we go where, there were tax incentives to take job projects overseas, automation lines and stuff. And I don't think any of that's ever been rescinded. I think that's still in place, isn't it?
I think a lot of it is.
Yeah. So like I said, I don't think government has done a whole lot to help the problem with manufacturing in America, and they need to step up. I mean, not to get into the politics, but I heard the president talking about how we should buy American and we should build an American, and we should I heard all that, but where's the legislation behind it?
Right. Well, Automotive for years said that.
It's just talk.
It's just talk, because Ford and General Motors and all of them said for years, buy American. Well, you mean it only on your side, because when you're buying presses, you're buying equipment, you're buying from China and whoever's cheapest.
Right. Right. Well, it's just like right now, we're buying Russian oil.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to pump our own. And okay, well, we got a problem here. What are we going to do about it? And I don't know. There doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in doing something about it, because somebody's afraid that it's going to impact their voting, vote totals if the gas price goes up.
Right. Yep. Bob, we are just. I'm sorry. Continue your.
No, I was just going to say, and we aren't willing to pump our own,
right?
So we can't solve that.
Yeah. Well, we aren't going to solve all the world's problems today, but
no, we are not. We are definitely not.
Thank you for your insight and your experiences, Bob. We really appreciate you. Tell people how they can find you.
I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way, under Robert, Iossi, and give me a call. I love talking to people.
Great. We appreciate you